My name is Linda Martin, and I was born in Boise, and I lived in Boise for 45 years. I was born into the Followers of Christ religion and attended the Meridian Church until I was 16 years old. Over the years, I've watched probably 3 generations of children die needlessly. The first one that impacted my life was when I was 9 years old. My cousin Ronnie was born on my birthday. My aunt went into labor at my birthday party, and she had him later that night. He died 10 days later from untreated pneumonia. I was told it was my fault that he died because I had been misbehaving, and God took him as a way to punish me. My cousin Jerry was one of 4 children to pass away to my aunt and uncle. Jerry was the only one of the 4 children that was born alive. The other 3 were stillborn. Jerry died when he was 10 years old of untreated diabetes. His father went in for appendix and gallbladder surgery after Jerry had passed away. So, my question about that is, these laws protect people that are not actually members of the religion. He was never baptized into the faith, so he was never actually a member of that church according to their tenets. Years later, my 2-year-old nephew passed away from untreated pneumonia. He was born with spina bifida and Arnold-Chiari syndrome. Arnold-Chiari syndrome is when the base of the brain is tethered in the spine by the spinal cord. As he grew, it was actually pulling the base of his brain into his spinal column. He was paralyzed from the waist down. He received no treatment of any kind, no physical therapy, nothing to help him with his pain. He had severe headaches every day of his life, and he passed away 1 month short of his 3rd birthday. He was not allowed to use a wheelchair. His only form of mobility was to put his hands into a carpet and drag himself around on the floor. Stephen's father was my brother. He became ill years later, and he let his heart disease go to where he ended up with enough pressure that it tore a hole in his heart. The prayers from the elders weren't relieving his pain, so he made the choice to go to St. Alphonsus Hospital in Boise. They flew in a specialist from Seattle to perform experimental surgery on him to extend his life. This surgery had only been performed in the United States 3 times by this one doctor from Seattle. The state of Idaho ended up picking up almost $500,000 in medical bills for my brother, because he did not believe in insurance after he left his job at the county, because he didn't believe that he would ever go to a doctor because they practice faith healing. My nephew's mother, my sister-in-law, had a stroke at the same time that my brother was having his heart disease. She's still under medical care to this day. They deprived all of their children medical care when they were growing up. I had one nephew that had a rupture or a hernia when he was about 2 years old. It was not repaired until he was in his late 20s. So he ended up suffering almost his entire life. In Peaceful Valley Cemetery is what I talk about a lot. It's because it's in Caldwell, Idaho, in Canyon County. Canyon County has the highest death rate due to faith healing in Idaho. The ordinances and the laws there allow this abuse to go on unchecked. In Peaceful Valley Cemetery, there are approximately 613 total graves. 210 of those are for children. The slides behind me are some of the children that have passed away, and all of these headstones are the ones in Peaceful Valley Cemetery. Not all of the children could have been saved. Some did die in car accidents and other means. but there's a big percentage of them that we don't know how they died. There are also unmarked graves that we don't know if there's children in them or not. There's no accurate way to trace faith deaths in Idaho. The Bureau of Vital Statistics does not keep record on faith deaths. The coroners do not have a uniform method of reporting faith deaths. A lot of them are just listed as natural causes, and it goes into a different category. As an example of that, the Governor's Task Force on Children at Risk from 2011 to 2013 report that there were 10 faith deaths, and all of these children would have been saved with medical help. I have coroner's reports for 13 children during that same time frame. 2 of them is debatable whether they would have lived with medical care or not. The coroner's reports, in 2011, the Canyon County coroner reported that she had not done an autopsy on a Followers of Christ child in years. She has said in multiple interviews the way that she determines the cause of death is interviewing the family and the people that are there at the time of death. The scenes are compromised because there are so many members of the church and family that surround the body, and a lot of times the only examination of the body is done at the home with all of these family members surrounding it. My question has always been, if there's no autopsy, how can, what are they missing? Is there something that they could be missing with these children? I think most places require a medically unattended death of a child under 18 to have autopsies. I'm not sure where Idaho stands on that. It's extremely hard to get the records for these children now. I've requested autopsy reports, and it's getting to the point now of where I'm being ignored. So a lot of the children that have passed away, I have no access to their records to actually find out how they died. A lot of the children do not get birth certificates. There are several cases that I have followed up on. I knew the names of the members of the church, and so I looked under public records, and I found that there's several cases of church members that are applying for birth certificates for older children and adults. So that also prevents these children from reaching their full potential. Without a birth certificate, they're pretty much destined to work in family businesses. They live on family property. A lot of them are homeschooled. Very few of them are seen by a mandated reporter when they're sick. And in the small communities, usually they're surrounded by people of the same faith, so the deaths are not, the illnesses are not reported so CPS can intervene. If CPS does intervene, it's like in 2010, there was a 17-year-old boy that was critically injured in an ATV accident in Canyon County. He was life-flighted to St. Alphonsus Hospital. Law enforcement was called in, and they allowed the parents, who were members of Followers of Christ, to remove a critically injured child from the emergency room against doctor's wishes. So Children's Services pretty much fails these children. When my nephew was sick and dying from pneumonia, I called Health and Welfare. I asked them if there was any way to intervene. I told them what the fate was of my brother and his wife. They said, "We're sorry, they're not doing anything illegal. We cannot help that child." In 2015, or not 2015, excuse me, in 1915, there was a girl in Twin Falls. Her name was Pearl Annis. Her parents were prosecuted for allowing her to die from sepsis. She had a severe case of constipation, which ended up where she ended up with sepsis, a severe infection from it, and passed away. I cannot find any more prosecutions of a faith death since 1915. In 2011, Oregon repealed their religious shield laws. Since 2009, I believe there have only been 3 prosecutions for faith deaths. Changing the laws does work. What I've been asking for is there's one sentence in 4 statutes in Idaho that state that a parent is not negligent if the only form of medical treatment for a sick or injured child or a vulnerable adult is by spiritual means or prayer alone. That means that if they treat this child with natural medicine or herbal supplements, anything except for prayer and anointing with oil, they're not covered by the exemption. These kids deserve to have the same protection under Idaho child protection laws that any other child has. With this one sentence in 4 statutes, that eliminates these children from being protected by the Idaho Child Protection Act. Their rights are being denied by their parents. Parents are making decisions for these children to allow them to die, and then the parents themselves are not making that same decision for themselves when they become ill. In the followers of Christ, almost all of the adults and children are treated for eyeglasses and dental work. Medicine, Novocaine is a form of medicine. It's used in dental work. Eyes are dilated, that is medicine. On August 4th of this year, the Idaho legislature had an interim committee that the governor requested, and it was for children at risk and faith healing. One of the members of the church stood up and spoke, and he said that children were property and they had no rights. And that medicine was from the devil, and it meant that it was basically pharmaceuticals were from witchcraft and sorcery, so they couldn't partake in it. This gentleman that spoke about children having no rights has lost 2 children, both of them to pneumonia. One was 17 and one was 14. One of the children was ill before he died from pneumonia. CPS did intervene in that case. I don't know what the outcome of that is because medical records are not attainable. That's private information. What I've seen over the years, one reason I started this is when my brother became ill, I talked to him and I asked him, I said, if you had to do it over again, would you get medical help for Stephen? Now that you're going to a doctor and receiving his medical care and you know it works, would you do it differently? And he said no. He said that the prayer and the elders were working for Stephen, but they weren't working for him, so he had no choice. My sister-in-law just doesn't even acknowledge that she did anything wrong. With Stephen's pictures, she bundled them all up and sent them to my other nephew. It's like this child never existed. If you stand up against the church and your family, you're shunned. These children, if they choose to leave, a lot of them work for family-owned businesses. A lot of them live on family-owned property. They stand to lose their family, their business, and their home. It's extremely hard to leave under those circumstances. I left when I was 16, but it was kind of a unique situation because up until I moved to Oregon in 1999, I was still going into homes when people were sick and helping them. I worked for the hospital as a home care aide, and I worked in nursing homes as a nurse's aide for several years. They loved having me in there because I knew how to help take care of people. My mother passed away in 1999. About 3 or 4 months after she passed away, my father told me that she had asked to go to the hospital while she was dying, and she was refused. He told her that he would not take her, that she would have to get a member of the church to take her, and nobody would take her into the hospital. And then after my brother died, I started looking around at the different church members, and I started seeing people that were on oxygen. You have to have a prescription from a doctor to get oxygen. I know of one elder in the church that is seeking medical treatment for prostate cancer, is still praying over people as they die. It's very hypocritical. My brother was in the church for 63 years. When he went into the doctor, the elder of the church at that time came to him and said he was no longer welcome to attend that church. These children don't just go to sleep and not wake up. They suffer for days, weeks, and months. I have a coroner's report on one young man. He was 21, so legally he was an adult. But he was sick for 5 months while he wasted away of untreated diabetes. His brother in the same family had been on insulin since he was 9 years old. So one child they chose to treat medically, the other child was denied. They also had a 16-year-old girl that vomited so much that she ruptured her esophagus and passed away. They had 3 children in one family that died, but yet they gave medical treatment to one child. I don't know if it was forced from CPS or why they treated one child over the others. But it doesn't make any sense. And when I started this, my first interview was in 2013 at KTU in Portland, Oregon. Portland, Oregon reporter was the only one that would talk to me about this. And he told me, he says, you have to tell me of a new death before I can even get involved in it. I called him within 24 hours and gave him 2 names. He went to Idaho, and over the next week or so, he sent me copies of coroner's reports for 10 more children. When I started this, I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and tell my story at this news station. And people are going to see that this is horrible and these children need help, and everybody's going to stand up. It's going to be a no-brainer. 4 years later, I'm still back where I started from. Nothing has changed. I hear from people that as long as abortions are legal in the United States, that these children are collateral damage in a fight against abortion. I've heard that this is a parental right to let these children die, and it's a religious freedom. I'm a firm believer in religious freedom, and you have to draw a line somewhere. I didn't just wake up one day and decide to do this. I started looking around. I saw the hypocrisy within the church. I saw the abuse that was going on. My father became very ill when I started lobbying the legislature. From 2013, my story first aired in Portland, November 7th, 2013, the first time. It aired in Boise on KBOI, November 27th of 2013. 2 months later, I was thrown into the legislature lobbying to get a bill passed. That bill was presented by John Gannon. It was just to amend the neglect law. It had nothing to do with the manslaughter law or the civil non-support laws. We had a print hearing, it passed the print hearing, it went into the Judiciary and Rules Committee in the legislature. Scott Bedke, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, pulled it out of the committee and killed it by not giving it a hearing because he said it was not something that they needed to debate during an election year, and they did not have time to debate this controversial an issue because they wanted to end the session on time. My question to him was, how many children is it going to take before it becomes an emergency situation in Idaho? Followers of Christ are not the only faith-healing denomination in Idaho. There's another group called Church of the Firstborn. They also have children in Oregon today. The last child death was for Sybil Rossler. She was, I think, 11 or 12 years old when she died from untreated pneumonia. I went to her parents' trial, and I found out that I'm also related to people in the Church of the Firstborn. So their bloodlines and their doctrines are the same. They have churches in Idaho. In about 2006, the Church of the Firstborn had over 100 churches in 21 different states with approximately around 20,000 members. Usually where there's a Church of the Firstborn, there's a Followers of Christ church not too far behind. There are Church of the Firstborn and Followers of Christ churches in Spokane, Washington. As these other states start repealing the rest of their religious shield laws, these people are going to start moving into Idaho. I know of people in Oregon, at Grants Pass, Oregon, that have moved back to Idaho since the laws were repealed in Oregon because they are protected here. Canyon County is the perfect breeding ground for this type of abuse because they have no ordinances on the disposal of human remains. It's legal for them to bury in their backyard. My question has always been, if they don't get birth certificates for these children, and if these children die, how do we know if those deaths have even been reported or not? The number of deaths that I've been reporting on is conservative. I'm sure there's many more. And this is just one cemetery that I talk about. There are children buried in other cemeteries throughout Idaho. There's churches in 7 counties that I know of in Idaho with over 5,000 members just around the Canyon County, Hawaii County, Payette County area. And I think I'll probably just go ahead and leave that there. And go ahead and if you want Shakira next. So I won't bore you to death.